Good morning, everyone. Welcome to The Real Truth. I'm Tommy Spina. Today I'm talking with former Alabama Governor Jim Folsom Jr., a good friend and a damn good governor. How you doing this morning, Jim?
I'm doing great, Tommy. Good to hear from you today.
Yeah, I haven't spoken with you in earnest other than in passing in quite a while since our performing days. When we used to sing together. Jim has quite the voice. You might understand, and by listening to him, that he would be a baritone.
Well, that hadn't made me a dime yet, Tommy, so maybe you could promote it. You get the word out there, okay?
Perhaps that will happen.
No, it
Uh,
was yeah. We have played we have fooled around and had a little foolishness and fun with music
now
a
we're
couple of
too
times.
old.
It has been great. Yeah,
Now we're
you're
too
right.
old.
Well, the Rolling Stones are, so don't rule that out.
Well, as everyone knows, you were a Democrat and still are, who took office in the 90s. You did things before people thought about doing them some 25 plus years ago. One thing being taking the Confederate flag off of the Capitol dome. Uh, Another thing being, and it's an interesting story, although I don't know if we have time to tell the whole story, but you brought Mercedes Benz to Alabama, having been sworn into office on the tail end of Guy Hunt's removal from office. And someone showed up in your office with a letter that had been unopened sitting on Guy Hunt's desk from Mercedes Benz, as I understand it. Uh,
Yeah.
isn't, isn't that the sum total of how that experience opened up and drifted away from South Carolina and got us
No, that's right.
to
Yeah,
Alabama? Uh,
that's correct. Right.
well, we thank you for doing that. There has recently been an article published in the Atlantic magazine. It's called The Alabamification of National Politics. So, what I would like to do is ask you a very simple question. In 2026, can a Democrat still win a statewide election in Alabama against a Trump style Republican like Tommy Tuberville, assuming he's determined to actually be a resident of Alabama, which I have my doubts.
Yes. Uh, that's a good question.
That's what my job
And,
is,
and,
Jim.
and I think most people would assume that the odds would not be very good in a dark, deep red state like this. But I don't. And one thing I found out though throughout the years is that you can't make assumptions in politics because uh, the unexpected happens so many times with candidates for one reason or another. So you have to wait and see what evolves. Sure, I think that everyone knows, including our nominee Doug Jones, that it's going to be a very difficult, tough race, and it always is when you're the underdog. But hey, this particular candidate is a very qualified individual, attorney, a successful attorney for many years, has his heart in the right spot. He sincerely cares for the average working class Alabamian, middle class Alabamian. I think he sincerely wants to lend his time to help lead the state. So when you've got a good candidate like that, who will work night and day to achieve it and knows he's right, then you never rule things out. You've got to remember that this candidate did pull off a very big upset back in 17 for the U.S. Senate when no one thought he had the slightest chance. So it's all, and I've been in races myself. I as people can tell you around here, in Alabama, I've won 4 or 5 statewide races and lost 3 or 4. And the ones I lost were always within 1 point or less. So I've got a good feel for this. And in some of the races I won, I was the unexpected winner. I was the underdog myself way back in 1980 when I ran for the U.S. Senate against an incumbent. And lo and behold, I won the nomination. But then just 3 months later, lost in the Reagan landslide by roughly 1 point or less, half a point, something like that. So, it's handicapping political races is much more difficult than handicapping horse races or dog races or football games.
I'll bet.
Many things can happen during the course of a campaign, and you have to let the campaign finish. And in the end, after the candidates make their appeal and set their themes out, and then who knows what could happen. It's a difficult race, but there's always. But he does have a strong base and a strong base among Democrats that he can count on who will deliver the vote. It's a matter of mobilizing that vote and also pointing out how he can improve things, I think. So, yeah, it can certainly happen. There were just in the last primaries over the last few months in the state, you had a few surprises come up locally which people don't know about. But I'll be watching. And naturally, I think Doug Jones is a great individual. I think he would do a marvelous job. But we'll have to wait and see. It will be a tough race, as we know.
Well, as you've seen, national writers now are discovering what Kyle Whitmire, my good friend and oftentimes guest on this show, has coined as Alabamification. So are they just late getting to the game, or is this something you have watched over your whole career? So it seems like Alabama is now the template for the national political races.
Yeah, and I'm sure that a lot of Republican New Englanders and West Coast people wouldn't appreciate that, but I agree 100%. That has become the template of the standard. I grew up in politics in Alabama. My father served as governor 2 times, and I was a child. During his campaigns, I watched politics then. I ran myself 7 or 8 times statewide, and won about half of them. I was lieutenant governor 3 times, and I served a 3-year term as governor. Alabama politics, going back to BOK and many of the political scientists of the 1940s and 50s who analyzed us, what our politics was, always talked about Alabama being a local politics, but it was also a conservative state with a very game, populist, progressive group. And many times in our state's history, we've had progressives come to the forefront. And I think that the whole key here is the fact that those progressives who won were basically affirming affirming desires and wishes and hopes of the common person or the working person, whereas there's the reactionary conservative demonization of the working class, those that incited the working class by using the race card, using other things that they would fear, such as the great federal government, we stand up for Alabama, don't tread on us. Those fears, many times, and I think we all know it, personally, that George Wallace was not this way, but as a young, ambitious politician, he certainly utilized those tactics of inciting the working class or inciting the voters over the race issue, which worked many times in our state's history. I think nationally, I think what Whitmire is talking about is that now, for instance, that same tactic that has been used nationally, I think, in this case, not so well. Sometimes the race card in the coded sense, but more on the surface, the scare, the immigrant scare, I think, has been substituted for the old racial scare of the Deep South.
Good point.
And inciting and really motivating those voters who that is a hot button issue. The politicians who campaign, and this is a very easy thing to do. It's much easier to tear a building down than to build one. And it's very easy to hit hot button issues on the race issue or the scare of the immigrant issue to sometimes get elected. That seems to have worked pretty well for our current president, and it's been utilized by a lot of his proteges at the congressional level too, and he's garnered a great deal of power through this. But you can see the fact that whoever he endorses on the Republican slate, it generally wins. Now, I'm not saying all Republicans are racist, all Republicans are anti-immigrant. I think many of them
being one of them myself.
But they had yeah. Well, that's right. Well, you know, we all came over here on the boat, like they say.
Yeah.
My folks did. England 300 years ago, but
we're such a baby. We're such a baby country.
That's correct.
I don't think anybody appreciates that, but
yeah.
You know,
that what I talked about, that the issue, the way it was done, is basically the practice of let's raise the devil and then strike him down. In other words, we raise the devil, whether the devil is real or not. We raise the specter of that devil and then strike him down as a champion of the folks that are really scared of this. So that's I think that trend is come around. Yeah.
Well, your dad, also known as Big Jim, although there's nothing little about you, was a pro little guy politician.
Yes,
for sure.
Correct. Correct.
And how would you describe the political world your father operated in compared to the one you inherited in the 90s? What carried over and what has already disappeared?
Okay. uh, Alabama was a very agrarian state at that point in time. My father uh, came out of progressive tradition in Alabama politics. He was an admirer of Bibb Graves, who established the education system in the state. Admirer of other
which
progressives, and
which
then
which
excuse
you
me,
tried to do as well.
yes, and but he had populist ties in his background, and also he was a strong Democrat, a strong Harry Truman, FDR. His era, his generation were the New Dealers. So it was all about what we can do for our state or for our communities. We need better roads. He promoted pensions, teacher pay raises, pensions for teachers, all kind of people oriented, like you said, working class, middle class, people oriented programs to help the public. And that was his main interest as a progressive New Dealer politician who generation came out of World War II. There was at that time a strong, what they call the old bourbon class, uh, old industrial class who had been controlling Alabama politics for since it became a state in 1819. But that group was pretty much made up of the industrialists and of the large planters on the plantations and landowners. And they pretty much would get together every 4 years and decide who would want to be governor. But Big Jim Folsom, what he did was took, much like in the old Huey Long tradition in Louisiana, he took to the road with a band, gathering crowds up on his own with very little money, and sort of upset the apple cart and sort of changed politics because he implemented the farm to market road. And even though he was despised by much of the industrial class and by the old plantation class, who were basically still racist, he was despised by them because he stood up. He stood up for the civil rights and individual voting rights for African Americans way back when it was highly unpopular in the 1950s. And so he took a lot of licks for that, but he was elected twice and he gathered power. Now, I say over the next 40 years before I got in, 20, 30 years before I got in politics, we still had those elements out there. They weren't as powerful as they were at one point in time, because by this time, George Wallace, who had been really one of my father's campaign managers and in the state house, a floor leader, he basically started out as a progressive and espousing progressive messages. But after he lost his first election, he turned that around and successfully used the race card to get elected. But Wallace still had a progressive heart about him in past. He still cared about the working people, and I think shared a lot of my father's ideas from the old Bibb Graves days, my father's days, that he witnessed as a child. And he did things like establish the junior college system, which was very unpopular with the established universities, things that he thought would help the working class and middle class. So that was part of the evolution. But I would say the real change the thing that had a tremendous effect on politics in Alabama, because the old Southern Democrat was firmly entrenched up until the 1970s. Uh, Southern Democrats just basically dealt with a large group of people, African Americans, business. They had a huge tent, and they had to be very pragmatic politicians to survive. But we had some very, very, very good Democratic office holders in the South in those days who, in a lot of ways, made things happen by mending fences with the other side. But the real change that started affecting politics here in Alabama and throughout the South that changed, it transitioned it over a 20-year period was, I think, really the advent of the Southern strategy that took place in Nixon's campaigns and Reagan's campaigns in 1980 and onward, where the Republicans could not win because they could not break into the Deep South, the Democratic hold on the Southern Democratic hold on the Deep South. So the strategy that they developed was basically to co-opt the religious tendencies of the Southerner. It's the Bible Belt. So they co-opted and incorporated people like Jerry Falwell and many television Baptist ministers go across the station into their campaigns. And a lot of money was spent back then to incorporate them into their campaigns to the churches. That really, I witnessed that. I was running for the U.S. Senate in 1980, and was in pretty good shape, had a good lead. But Reagan endorsed my opponent on the last day, and I lost by, I think, 15 or 20,000 votes, very under a percentage point. But during that campaign, a lot of that transition took place because all of a sudden, Baptist churches and other churches were getting involved in campaigns. I'd never seen that before. I'd never seen ministers making endorsements for candidates on the Sunday before election in churches. This was a whole new phenomenon. I think a whole new phenomenon anywhere in the country at that point, because it had always been the standard that most Americans cherished back to the founding fathers on the principle of separation of church and state.
Yeah.
So this had a tremendous impact upon that election when you had many churches sign and have the congregation sign pledges to the Republican candidates on the ticket and receiving ballots in the churches. And that shifted, that tactic had a tremendous effect on the U.S. Senate and the Republicans taking the Senate, and a lot of Democrats losing that year. But that started the transition, and then we got to a point where the Southern Democrat was still strong enough to win, and I could still prevail in my campaigns up until 92. But by 1992, the transition had taken such a deep hold in the South, and especially in Alabama, that there were not enough registered Democrats to really make the race as competitive as it should be. In other words, it used to be you had, I think in the last polling done in 1992, the last polling done was 2006, my last race for lieutenant governor, there were 30, the party identification was split 30-30. So the independent vote would carry the day, and I won a close election with the independent vote. But the next race I ran in 2010, the Democratic idea had shrunk by 8 points, and the Republican had increased. So it was nearly impossible for a Democrat to win statewide starting in 2010. And that's been the case in Alabama ever since then.
You, um, as governor, are credited with building one of the most diverse cabinets in our state history and consciously trying to move Alabama away from the old segregationist image that you've been talking about. You made a big point of appointing women and African Americans and of changing symbols like the Confederate flag, and not just policies. Did you feel like you were fighting Alabama's past, or were you trying to redeem it? That's a hard question.
I don't think anybody has ever put it that way to me.
Well,
To tell you the
I
truth,
never know what I'm going to say until you say what you say.
to be perfectly honest with you, these were things I felt strongly. Being part of the history of the realignment in the South and some of the things that were going on, I was keenly aware of what the electorate was thinking and what the voter was thinking. They were changing their attitudes about quite a few things. And I understood how many of them felt about the race issue. I felt how some of them felt about changing the state to an automotive-based state. And I definitely understood that it would really incite a lot of our people when I took the Confederate flag down. But to just be honest with you, this is really just were my beliefs. I felt that the flag, we were the only state in the nation that flew the entire whole battle flag over our capital. I mean, other southern states had part of their flag, maybe had the Confederate flag on it, but we were the only one that flew the flag up there defiantly. And Wallace put that up there back during the 60s with the civil rights strife and to show that we were, to appeal or incite his constituent base that helped his politics. They said, we're going to fight the federal government, that kind of thing. But it stayed there for years and years and years. It became an issue during the 70s and 80s when there were many demonstrations by African American activists and others wanting the Confederate flag off the Capitol. Well, you say, well, that was only maybe there were 50 demonstrators out there, whatever. Did you haven't? The effect, though, here was the negative effect, is that in the eyes of the national media, this was a pretty big story. Every time we had demonstrations or controversies, this ended up on NBC national news.
Yeah.
And so nationally, what people thought around the world was, they're going to fly that flag. They don't care who doesn't like it, who doesn't care, and they will stay entrenched in the past. Well, it was not doing us any good at all as far as industrial development, those kind of things. And as a matter of fact, the Chamber of Commerce, State Chamber of Commerce, actually passed a resolution and actually lobbied a little bit in the legislature for us to take it down. This was under the jurisdiction of the governor, though he decided whether it went up or down. Uh, it can be done by executive order, but the legislature was not about to vote to take it down because there's too many of them thought there'd be repercussions back home, or they'd just be stirring up an ant's nest when they would just leave it alone. So those kind of things. But I really thought during those years, I said, I used to think to myself when I was lieutenant, I said, why doesn't the governor just get that issue out of the way? I said, there'll be cane raising for a few weeks, but then 6 months from now it'll be done behind us.
It'll pass the news cycle.
Yeah. We were always. I was lieutenant governor. I was having to always deal with bills from African American reps who were putting the bill in. We were having to debate the issue for hours many times, when it never had the votes to pass, but it just seemed to be such a waste of time. And I found out later that had an impact on us being successful in bringing the automobile industry to the state. And I was not really thinking too much about that at the time. I just knew we would improve the overall climate and try to get the issue. And I did it because I felt that way. Yeah.
Well, I want to bring us, as we close out this episode, to the now. So Doug Jones is the last Democrat to win a statewide election, is now running, that was in 2017. And he's now running against Tommy Tuberville, resident, we think, of Florida, which is in and of itself the subject matter of two of my past episodes here in 2026. So Tuberville, to me, embodies the nationalized Trumpist low policy depth style that was described in that Atlantic article. But looking back, Doug Jones, similarly situated, is another Alabama Democrat with a civil rights story that's matched up again with a Tommy Tuberville, somebody critics see as a Trump-style, low information culture war politician.
Yes.
Bottom line, in 2026, can a Democrat like Doug Jones, with his very similar pro-populist points of view, beat a Trump-aligned opponent, and frankly, an opponent that's intellectually limited? I mean, he did not know the three branches of government in the beginning. Maybe he does now. Or is that impossible? And if you were Doug Jones' shoes and you were running this race, what issues would you hammer, especially around hospitals, education, and just basic competence, for lack of a better word, that could crack the Trump era loyalty in places, particularly outside of Birmingham, Huntsville, and the Black Belt?
Well, that is a good question. And like I said, I lost my last political race, so I don't know if you're asking the right guy on this.
Well,
but I think
I don't win every case. Unlike my mentor, David Cromwell Johnson, said he never lost a case. I never believed that. That was the first. That was the first thing that could be described as fake news. Back then, it was unheard of. But anyway,
yeah, I think so. Like I said, it's a very difficult race, and I'm sure that the campaign. I know that they have a lot of good strategists, and I'm sure some very capable people coming up with their overall game plan. So their plan is probably going to be a lot like mine. But I think the only thing he can do is to hit at that issue that, look, said, I want to represent you. I'll do you a great job. We can make things better. We can help the image of the state. We need to keep hammering on industrial development. The things
Medicaid
that are
expansion.
important, Medicaid expansion, hospitals, schools, better education. Is going to have to campaign on those old traditional values and traditional issues that play well to Alabamans and motivate that. Also, he needs to appeal to their fairness, on matters of race and other things. And I think, speaking that he will be a governor for all Alabamians across this land, every single person in every county and city and the state, regardless of race, creed, color. He'll have an open door policy for them, and his sincerity of wanting to serve them. I think he's going to have to get as close to that old progressive populist message they can get, because it has been shown to work in our history, and I think those elements are still there. And he's going to be up against the other side, the side that wants to incite people, the side that wants to say no to everything. But I think if he can do that, and a lot of it's getting out there, and which I think he'll do. If he can cover enough ground and meet enough people individually in a retail fashion, like I said, and who knows? We never know what's going to happen during this 3-month campaign.
Next few months. Yeah,
there's a lot of issues. We could be talking about a whole new slate of issues by that point. Yeah,
and not to mention the lurking residency issue that is still up in the air, which is fascinating.
That's fascinating. Especially, I know I'm not an attorney, but I know for guys like you, for attorneys across the state, I know this is a very interesting, intriguing question of what the courts will do and what their response and language will be. And there's one thing that concerns me, and I've seen this in our national politics, and I worry that it may be true locally, is, the country, and the framework, the Constitution, this country has always been founded since the 18th century on, we're a nation of laws, not of men. Meaning that's always been our creed, always stood firm throughout history. That no man was above the rule of law in America. And that's how we distinguished ourselves, how the founding fathers distinguished ourselves from the royalty of the European heritage. But that I worry about that one principle in the Constitution, because even up through the Watergate years, even though the politics was enormous and the influence of the president was very strong, through it all, the rule of law stood, regardless of the partisan politics going on in the Senate.
As it should be.
Sometimes, yes, but I've noticed that it seems to me that there's a gray area now out there, and some of that's under assault in this country.
Absolutely.
And I worry about the influence. The president, I know, has strong influence on things. The influence of judges during this time are going to be watched very closely, because judges in the past have always stood with the rule of law, I think, or sincerely tried to do that in political situations. So this will be interesting. That's my perspective, not being an attorney.
Yeah.
I want to see how the rulings come down on this.
Well,
But
Jim,
I think it's pretty evident that spent a lot of time in Florida. So,
you can say it.
like I said, but I'm not the final arbiter of this thing.
We'll let Mr. Ragsdale drag that out in his lawsuit. I thank you for being with me. I really, really, really want to follow up with you maybe in a few weeks, because I've got a lot more I want to talk about. Would you be amenable to another conversation?
Sure.
Well, I appreciate your time today. This is The Real Truth. Thanks for being with us. Jim, have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining me today on The Real Truth. My name is Tommy Spina. I hope you enjoyed today's conversation. I hope you will follow or subscribe to my podcast and listen in to the next episode. If you found it valuable, please take a moment to rate it and review it. It helps us to reach more listeners that care about the issues that matter. Share it with a friend. Stay engaged, and remember, the truth matters. I'll see you next time.